Hi everyone, Zelda from Purpleworx Cement Clay here. I've got an old picture frame and I think it has a bit of varnish on it, and I'm just going to sand it down to remove some of the glossiness so that the cement clay can adhere to it. Once sanded down, make sure that all dust or grime or anything that can prevent it from sticking is removed. To cover the frame, I'm going to mix up some slip, and the slip can be used as a primer or as a glue, or once your product is finished and you have small cracks, it can easily be fixed with a little bit of slip. The cracks will appear if your mix wasn't 100%. That means either too dry or too wet. But that's not an issue. You can just fix it very easily otherwise than with other clays. So I'm having a little container, adding my powder, and I don't mix too much at once. The activator, I add a bit of that, and then some wood glue. I buy it in 5 liters, so I just put some in smaller containers, and it's not a definite mix. You just add a little bit of everything, and then I would add a little bit of water, and then mix as you go along to see whether the consistency is fine. It should be something between cream and yogurt, not too thick and not too thin, but you can also leave it in a thicker state and then cover the area that you want to cover in a rough manner. That means it's not smooth. So we can try a bit of that as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the whole frame with a layer of this. And that will give the base on which I can work or add some embellishments or handmade items, or just build an art piece on top of this. And this will give that pure cement look that would hide the frame that was actually made of wood. I'm leaving my frame to dry a bit, and I've got this beautiful mold with a very fine texture, and I'm going to try and use this and apply it to my frame. I've measured out 1 cup of clay powder, and here's my 50 ml container with about 40 ml of activator in it. I'm just going to add some water to fill it up to 50, and then adding that and mixing it through. Next is the glue. So I'm adding about 40 ml in my 50 ml container. Then adding water to top it up. And mixing it. And now this part needs to be mixed very well. Keep some powder handy, that if you feel this is too sticky, then you can just add a little bit of powder and mix it up again. You keep on trying until you get the right consistency. If it's too wet, add powder. If it's too dry, just add a drop of water. But only little bits at a time, so that you can see it's a workable clay. And you can see it start forming a nice round piece. So this is similar to making dough for bread. As soon as everything sticks together and they stay together, you're getting very close to the right consistency. I start to knead, folding it in from the outside to the inside. I find that method works well for me. You can find what works for you. If I feel it's still too sticky, just add it a little bit. And then work it in. And this is very, very soft. And maybe a little bit too soft for my mold. A bit more of powder. And work it through. This is very, very soft. And I think maybe too soft to take my pattern, but I'm going to test it. Yeah, there's some powder still lying around here. Let's just work it in. I do not spray my molds, but if you are not sure whether it's going to work or not, all that's going to happen is your clay is going to stick to your mold and it won't come out clear. But you just wash the mold, let it dry, and just redo it. This one is definitely still too wet. I think I added a little bit of too much water. But that's no problem. You just knead it for another minute or two and you get it to the right thickness and workable clay. I only do small amounts at a time, because if you put in too much, then you might have to work in more water again. But this is a very relaxing part of the clay work, and I enjoyed thoroughly working with my clay. You can also put some corn flour in to line it out, or even some powder if you are a bit nervous about it sticking. So let's try our first round and see how it goes. You can use a cake roller to press it down evenly. You can use a plank or a wooden spoon even to do it. And let's test it. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. It's a little bit thick. I don't want to put that thickness on my frame, so I'm going to make it a bit thinner by dividing the piece in two. What I usually do is I hold the mold in my hand, turn it over, and peel away the silicone from the clay. And there's a beautiful design. Now if I want to use it somewhere here, I would just, this is still wet, but I will just add a little bit of water. Make sure it's quite wet. And then I will add it there. If you want the piece to be hard and to stand up, I will first let this dry and then do it. But now I just want to use some of this on my frame. I'm just pressing the sides down. You could even leave some excess and then work it down to make sure that it sticks. But once dry, it would be rock hard. And now you can fill up the spaces in between by just adding more. If this is a bit too dry, just add a little bit of water, or mix up some slip again and just add it there where you would like to put in all the embellishments. You can have the embellishments done on your mold, and when they're still wet, add them to your frame, or you can use dry ones that you previously made and just add them onto the frame. This is a very thin mold. I don't think it's quite deep, but it's got a beautiful leaf with so much detail to it. I don't know if you can see on the camera. So just for safety, I'm just going to dust it with a bit of the powder to make sure it doesn't stick, and to get all that fine detail. The moment that you put in the powder, you can clearly see it. So let's try it. I'm going to do this one. I press in my cement clay a bit wider than the mold I want to do. Then I pull away the mold, and now you can have a look. It's beautiful. And if I want to use it around here, I would moisten the area if it's already starting to dry. Maybe that's too much ish. And then I would moisten the back of my clay, and then I will add it in there. And now I can work it down. And that clay disappears into the background, and your leaf is standing out beautifully. I like to make some embellishments if I'm just sitting around, and keeping them handy when I want to decorate something they're already made and they are hard. These are cement clay on this side, and this is pottery clay bisqueware. So that means it's been once through the first firing in the kiln, and now it's in the raw form. I have used the chocolate mold. Just spray it, and you can use your cement clay in it to do this one. And now I want to show you if you want to add this to your frame. So we've got the ones that are still wet, and then we work at, I want to add this pottery leaf there, and we're going to paint over everything, so it doesn't matter at the moment. I'm just adding some slip there to the item, and then if this is already dry, just weten it again or add some slip, and then I can position it where I want it. And I can even having it overlapping on the side, giving it a bit of depth. And once this is set, it's rock hard. You won't move it. You might break the frame, but you won't break the place where it was fixed together. And we just like telling a story here of leaves, and we can position them a bit more at an angle. And we can go on filling it up with something else. At the bottom, I think I want to do a flower story. So I'm going to move over here and maybe start with the cement clay rose. So it is rock hard. Add some slip. This is already starting to set, because the clay starts to set in 30 minutes. So you must work with the wet ones in small amounts. And I'm going to add that one there, and then maybe add a one here. Oh no, here's my other leaf that I wanted to use here. While it's still wet, you can move it. Let's just work this one in here first. Okay, let's move over to this side. I have added all the elements that I want on my frame, and some of them are already fixed. You can't move them. The ones that are wet, I'm going to leave to dry for a while. They start to dry in 30 minutes. That just means you can't work on it anymore, because you're going to damage it, but it's not completely dry. But you can work in layers, so should you wish, when this is dry, it's still a little bit wet, to add something over it, you would just add some slip to this side and there, and then you can add it on there for a second layer or a three-dimensional look. And you can add whatever you like. If you got shells for a sea theme, or you have some embellishments or mosaic inserts, you can all add them with your cement clay, both to the item and to the surface where you want to attach it, and just leave it there to dry thoroughly, and it should be fine. If afterwards you see there's some areas that you would like to fill up, like this, you can easily mix up your clay or your slip and fill in the gaps that you don't want to open. But it gives a depth once painting it, and you will see the difference when it's painted. So here the black was moved into all the spaces and then removed with a cloth or a sponge, and you get this very vintage look to the frame. The next color I want to use is a mustard, and I'm going to apply it in the same manner by adding it to certain areas and then removing it again. So I'm going over the black. The next color I want to use is a rustic brown, and I'm adding it all over. Just look at that pattern. Oh, let me show you up close. For highlighting purposes, I'm taking the mustard paint on a dry brush, adding some to the brush and taking off most of it, and I'm choosing the very darkest parts to highlight. And the purpose of it is to see the pattern or the detail that we included in the clay, and it brings it out beautifully. The darkest color will use a highlighter, and the highlighting would use a dark color. So on here we could use a black, on here I'm using a mustard. So here I've got some beautiful lines on this flower, and I'm just going to highlight it like that. You can also do the edges of this one. With this I've used the three colors, the black and the diluted black, and then with some of the mustard mixing up with the black and the rustic brown, and that whole feeling gives a very metal look to it, or a medieval look to it, and I think it could be a beautiful frame if you got an appropriate picture to put inside it. Just check all your sides so there's no white showing. You can trim that along, and you could add some sealer on it, like Granny B's Armour, hard as nails, or something like that, should you hang it outside. Or if you want it to shine, you can add a gloss varnish to it. The paint I've used is just normal acrylic paint, nothing fancy to it. You can use PVA, you can use chalk paint, you can use roof paint, whatever you wish. And have a look at the detail here, and there, and here, and there. I love the colors blending and giving you that very old look.